Good afternoon. I'm James Crumble. That breaking news, continuing coverage of the deadly shooting in York County. 3 officers killed, 2 others critically wounded, and now we're learning about the man accused of pulling the trigger. We have live team coverage this afternoon. Sarah Wilson is at a vigil for the fallen officers, but we begin with our Seth Kaplan live in North Codorus Township with the latest on the investigation. Good afternoon, Seth.
Good afternoon to you, James. And the very latest is that we now know the identity of the alleged shooter. It's 24-year-old Matthew Ruth. And we are also putting together more pieces of this puzzle in terms of what happened. And a lot of it's kind of reconciling with what neighbors had begun telling us yesterday. First, I want to show you where we are now. If you can see, we are much closer to where everything happened. That is the house where everything began. And just for perspective, yesterday we showed you the top of a white roof that you could see just over a cornfield, and that is that same roof. It's a barn that was the only thing we could see from the vantage point we had yesterday. Now we are much closer. How close? Well, let me put it to you this way, James. We're not going to show you this because it's too disturbing, but there is blood on the pavement right next to me. I'm not sure I've ever seen a law enforcement response quite like the one we saw out here yesterday, one commensurate with what had happened. 5 police officers shot, 3 of them died. At this hour, officials have not yet officially said what agency those 3 officers worked with, but we can tell you there is a growing memorial at Northern York Regional Police Department, which is the department that covers this area. By all accounts, York County deputy sheriffs had shown up to serve a search warrant, and then Northern York came out behind them to assist. And according to the documents we've seen this morning, court documents, there had been a domestic dispute, again similar to what we had heard from neighbors, involving an ex-boyfriend of a woman who apparently lives in the house. Spoke yesterday to a neighbor who recalled in chilling detail what he heard and saw.
Traumatic, pretty traumatic, to witness what I heard and saw. Where you see the white roof above the cornfield. I was around the bend up here where you see the end of the lights. The officer motioned me by, and I passed, and when I passed the barn, I heard gunshots within a few minutes, and I saw an officer go down on the road, in the middle of the road. Pretty alarming. So I got clear of everything. I heard the gunshots, many gunshots. We know the family well. Yeah, I know the family well. They have relatives all over the neighborhood here. Didn't understand what may have led to this or what was going on, but I suspected that, they had someone on the property that was, looking to do harm.
You were probably the closest person who wasn't involved to...
I was the only person that wasn't involved, yes. Quiet neighborhood, normally.
And you heard him already there alluding to some of those details that reconcile with what we are now seeing in the court documents about somebody you heard him say at the home who perhaps wasn't welcome there. We now know police say that somebody was 24-year-old Matthew Ruth, who they say was the ex-boyfriend of a woman who lives in that house right there. We know that the shooter is dead. We know that those 3 police officers, of course, lost their lives. And we know that there are 2 police officers at last word still in critical but stable condition at WellSpan York Hospital. I can tell you, James, that sometimes in the chaos of something awful, you hear a lot of things early on that turn out not to be the case. This is one of those situations where, as we continue confirming more details, they basically reconcile with what our worst fears were. I mean, this is what we heard on the police scanner 22 hours ago at this point, 3 officers down and all the rest of it. And, you hope there's some confusion. You hope that's just the worst case scenario and that there's better news to come. And in this case, it just all keeps tracking with what we believed early on but are now able to confirm.
Seth, I mean, we're still learning some new details, still a lot of questions left to be answered. And I know you've been out there since yesterday, and you were so far back yesterday. Now you're a lot closer. I'm curious, as this investigation goes on, have you seen any police officers yourself there at the scene at that house?
Since I personally got here just shortly ago, no. So it's a totally different scene. I mean, yesterday, as you said, we couldn't get near here. Where we are lined up here yesterday were just dozens and dozens of law enforcement vehicles from everywhere. Now it's candidly dozens and dozens of news vehicles from all over the country. I mean, we are in the middle, and I mentioned this yesterday, for one measure of the gravity of what happens. You know, when it's 6:45 last night and we're on here live, normally in World News Tonight, what that tells you is normally at that hour, we're learning about all the things that happen everywhere else in the country and world. Instead, the country and world were learning about what is happening here. And so at this point, yeah, it's more of us and our competitors and colleagues from throughout the country who are here. Still, police tape. I mean, you are at at what was a very active crime scene. And I mentioned that gruesome evidence that we just, I mean, it's right here. And it's just, you know, this is a rough one, James, for everybody.
Absolutely. And as you mentioned earlier, too, we're still putting the pieces of this puzzle together. We did learn the name of the alleged shooter, and I know you do have some court documents. I want to ask you to continue to look through them, and we're going to come back to you coming up in our next half hour and find out if you learned anything new from that. So Seth Kaplan live for us in North Codorus Township. Thank you so much for that.
Hi, I'm Eric Finkenbinder from ABC 27, and we're excited to announce the new ABC 27 News Plus app. Live stream newscasts or watch content on demand. This is different than the ABC 27 app on your smartphone. You can check this out at home, and it's very easy to use. With a Fire Stick, go to the homepage, scroll down to search. From there, enter ABC 27. Move over to the apps, and there we are. Click the icon and install. It's just that easy.